So someone asked me a question this week. What are some franchise options that have a low barrier to entry? Hello, I'm Patricia Botero Saint Jean, founder of Open for Business and business research strategist. I love that question, and it's great timing because this week I'm teaching a 5-week course, and this week my student and I are going over turnkey concepts, which includes franchises and business opportunities. Last week, we talked about startup businesses from your idea, independent startup businesses, and how to vet your idea before you launch it. And next week, we'll be talking about acquisitions. But this week, it's turnkey concepts. So the startup cost of any business types is going to include usually all the leasehold improvements, legal cost, financing cost. If you get a loan for that business, is going to include furniture, equipment, etc. And if you buy a franchise, in addition to that, you will have to pay a franchise fee. The franchise fee gives you access to the methodology, to the systems, to the product that it's developed, to the proven concept, and to the secret sauce of the franchise. So the only difference between startup cost in an independent business and startup cost in a franchise business is going to be the franchise fee. Pretty much the rest is going to be equal, considering that if you're buying the same quality of furniture, for example, right? So here's the difference between startup cost. If you want low startup cost, whether it's a franchise or in an independent business from your idea, um, office-based business, and especially a home-based business, is going to be a lot cheaper for obvious reason. You don't have the leasehold improvement and all the furniture, etc., to invest in. You just have your office, which can be a home office or an office you rent, and then a desk and your computer and some basic office supplies. But that's pretty much what you would need in an office-based business. Now, if you buy a franchise in an office-based business, you also will have to pay the franchise fee. Now, here's the difference. In a home-based business, the franchise fee can be quite higher sometimes. It can be $50,000 for a home-based business in a franchise where the whole business is about $60,000. So the most of the cost in a home-based business in a franchise may actually come from the franchise fee. If you invest in a franchise restaurant, for example, that franchise fee could be around $30,000, quite lower, considering that the restaurant franchise is going to cost maybe $300,000 or $500,000. So low barrier to entry in general, an office-based business is going to be lower. But if you're talking about the franchise fee, typically the franchise fee will be lower in a brick and mortar business as opposed to a home-based business or an office-based business. Now, there's another cost that you may want to think about if you're starting a home-based business, are the business development cost. If you're opening a brick and mortar location, for example, franchise, not franchise, the business is going to be driven by the location. People are going to know where you are because you're doing some clever social media marketing, you're doing some marketing in general, and typically they know it's in their neighborhood, so they'll know that your service, whatever service or products you're selling, is there in their neighborhood or in the location that they can find. So for that reason, you don't have to do a lot of work to bring customers to your business. Now, if you start a home-based business, it's a completely different story. Keep in mind, it may seem cheaper at first to invest in a home-based business, and I have nothing against them. I own a home-based business. I also owned a brick and mortar location before. So it's great to have a home-based business, but keep in mind, it will cost you significant amount of money to ramp up that business, especially if you don't have any business development skills. Let's say maybe you're a creative type, or maybe you have worked for a corporation as an engineer or programmer your whole life and you want to start a home-based business. Keep in mind that business development is not free. You need to, number one, know how to do it. And if you don't, you could hire someone to do it. It might be a clever way to do it, actually, if this is something you have no interest in learning. But if it's something that you're interested in learning, I recommend you start a franchise because they'll teach you how to do business development, and they'll give you some tools to support you. But even if you don't get a franchise, then consider hiring someone to do the business development while you focus on your strengths, your creative strengths, for example. And one thing you may want to consider is, if you want to learn it yourself, then plan for some working capital that would take a little bit longer, higher working capital than you would in a brick and mortar location, or than if you had experience as a business developer. That could take you a year or 2 years, actually. So that's it for today. The difference of the barrier to entry in a franchise business. If it's a home-based business, much cheaper, but think about what it's going to cost you to develop that business in the long term, over a year or 2 years, to bring customers to your doorstep, right? Because it doesn't happen like it does in a brick and mortar location where people go to your location. So this week, this is what we're covering, or part of what we're covering during my class. Next week, we'll talk about acquisitions and how to vet a business to buy. Thank you for watching, and cheers to building a life we love. Take care.